In this James the Bike Guy, we're checking out a trail bike platform that's insanely popular around here in New England, something that's at home on rocky and rooty terrain, but also loves the descent if you're able to open it up. A bike with 140 millimeters of front travel and a carbon frame. We're checking out that Trek Fuel EX, the 9.7. This is the 2022 version, and we're gonna go into the features and designs of this bike, as well as, of course, we'll find out what it weighs. So if this kind of thing is interesting to you, please be sure to sit back and enjoy the video, leave some comments below, and smash that subscribe button. As I was mentioning in the beginning, the Trek Fuel EX is an insanely popular trail bike. This is the kind of trail bike that you're no doubt going to come across virtually anytime you're out riding. They have them from pretty inexpensive aluminum full suspension trail bikes all the way up to the Mac Daddy $10,000 models. So the Trek Fuel EX ends up being a pretty awesome platform for a lot of riding. And a few reasons for that are going to be some conservative yet progressive geometry we'll talk about later. The fact that it's got 140 up front and 130 millimeters of rear travel. Some customization and geometry through its minnow link, and then a pretty good part spec to boot. Now, the version we're checking out here is the 9.7, which means it's a carbon frame, but Trek's nomenclature, single digit refers to the bike being an aluminum frame, and then single digit with a point after it refers to the bike being a carbon frame. Now, the higher the number, the nicer the part spec. So this being the 9.7 is the least expensive carbon in the lineup and offers a pretty good value in Trek's Fuel EX line. The Fuel EX frame is really the platform to the basis of this bike. The Fuel EX frame is super versatile, mostly because of its geometry and its ability to match up some progressive numbers where it needs to be, but staying conservative enough that it fits with a lot of riding styles. So before we get into the features, let's talk about geometry. So it does have an adjustment in the back called a minnow link that you're able to adjust in a high or low position. We'll get into that more. But this bike's standing as is in a size medium. In the low position, it's gonna rock a 66-degree head tube angle, an effective seat tube angle of 75, a chainstay length of 436, and a bottom bracket drop of 34 millimeters. Now, when you switch it up to the high position, the head tube and the seat tube get steeper by half a degree, and that bottom bracket drop comes up to 28 millimeters. Now, those numbers aren't going to be internet shattering or anything like that, but the fact that it's matching up that steep effective seat tube angle at 75 degrees and then the head tube angle of 66 degrees is going to make it both able to climb really well and descend confidently as well. And one of the places where this bike comes in and pedals so well is going to be through their ABP suspension design. So the ABP suspension is what they have going on the back here, which is essentially a modified single pivot setup. So you can see the front pivot is just above the crankset, and then you go to the back and it's running a concentric bearing between your chainstay and your seat stay. Now, what this allows for is there's going to be some great anti-squat characteristics out of the bike, but they're going to help balance out some of the anti-rise characteristics by having that braking system concentric with the axle. So that means when you're descending and you're braking, it's not going to limit the travel of the rear suspension, and this bike is naturally going to have a pretty strong pedaling platform so that when you're pedaling, especially with that 75-degree seat tube angle, it should accelerate real well. I've had some good experience on Fuel EXs, I've owned a few, and this ABP suspension, at least here in New England, works pretty mint. Moving forward, to control the geometry adjustment is something called a minnow link. So the minnow link that's here, this essentially is an ovalized nut for the pivot bolt. Now, the pivot bolt going to that rocker link from your seat stay, when you move that, it's going to make it longer or shorter, which is essentially raising the bottom bracket and steepening the front triangle. So it's a pretty slick setup. And of course, tracking that suspension down in the back is a Fox Evolve shock. This is their float shock, but it has Trek's reactive tuning, which is a damper specifically tuned by Trek for this particular platform. Something that you're probably not even noticing because it's all internal is of course going to be the cable routing of this bike. So even through to the chainstay, almost everything is tucked in just above the bottom bracket. You can see a pretty neat connection that ties everything together. And going forward on the bike, everything is slickly integrated, including the integration of their storage box. So the storage box comes off, and inside is going to be the spot to be able to use their little bits bag. This allows you to run a tube, all sorts of stuff inside of the bike. I mean, this is the size of a pretty big burrito. So you've got lots of room in here. And I do like the fact that it's got some rubberized on the sides, which should help keep it nice and weatherproof when you're on the trail. Moving forward to controversial feature on the bike is the knock block system. So knock block limits the steering angle that the handlebar can go in. And that's because to get the frame stiffer and include that internal storage of the bike, you'll see the down tube is quite straight on this bike. And of course, if it's that straight and you were to go around, you'll notice that the fork crown, this piece here, would run into the frame and potentially cause damage. Now, if you've never ridden a bike with knock block, the only place you're going to notice this is, of course, when you're walking your bike around your house, getting it in your car, because the handlebar won't twist all the way around. But on the trail, it offers plenty of range to be able to get through even some of the tight stuff. And then, of course, handling the suspension duties on the front end of the bike, it's going to be the Fox Rhythm 36. I love to see these more beefy and burly forks coming on these trail bikes, because now we've got 36 millimeters of stanchion, just going to give a nice stiff setup on the front end. The Fox Rhythm is really sweet with their grip damper system. This damper system is going to give you nice control. It's got a smooth function from open to firm. And then on the non-drive side, you have air adjustment through their float system. Now this will be able to run 36 millimeter tokens, so you can dial in the air volume through spacers on the non-drive side and dial this in to your riding style. The last things to mention, of course, are going to be axle standards and bottom bracket. So this is a press fit bottom bracket, but the axle standards on the bike are going to be 15 by 110 up front and 12 by 148 in the rear for a standard boost setup. Cockpit components on this bike are going to be all aluminum through Trek's in-house brand Bontrager. So you can see a super wide alloy line 35 millimeter bar. This bar is 780 millimeters wide, connecting up to a Line Elite stem. The stem, of course, matches up with their knock block system. You can swap this out for another stem with an adapter, and you don't have to be married into a Bontrager stem, but it's a nice stiff setup. 35 millimeter bar clamp for lots of control. And moving out back is the Arvada saddle from Bontrager, and then their line dropper post. So this dropper post on sizes extra small and small, it's going to be 100 millimeters of length, and then in sizes medium to extra large is 150 millimeters. And so you just saw that dropper post rise right up, and that's controlled using this thumb lever that's similar to one by style. So it looks almost like a shifter, matching the right hand side, but for a nice clean cockpit look. The drivetrain on this 9.7 is of course going to be mid-level, placed right where the bike is. So it's running a 12-speed drivetrain in the back and one ring up front using Shimano's XT rear derailleur. So this XT rear derailleur is going to be their M8100 series. It's a clutched rear derailleur, meaning you can turn the clutch on and off. With it on, it's going to help keep the chain nice and tensioned, super quiet, and you do have this rubberized protector for the chainstay, just in case the chain starts slapping around. And in the back, this is 10 to 51 teeth of range. So that means a 510% range on this bike, which is pretty close to what a traditional 2x9 system would have been. And up front is a 30-tooth narrow wide chainring on this Shimano crankset. Slowing the bike down is going to be Shimano's M6100 lever. This lever is very similar to the branded Deore lever setup. And then down at the wheel, you'll see there's a 4-piston M6120 caliper. That 4-piston caliper on the front and the rear is going to have tons of stopping power on these 6-bolt disc rotors. For wheels and tires, the 2022 is pretty well spec'd with this brand new XR5 tire. This tire I haven't had a chance to ride, but I'm really looking forward to having lots of experience on their slightly less aggressive XR4. It was a sweet tire, but the XR5 has a lot larger tread blocks. I mean, my finger can fit in between really steep and strong side knobs. So I suspect at speed, this tire is gonna be pretty sweet. And of course, it's tubeless ready with a 29 by 2.6 tire width. Wheels are provided by Bontrager and are the Line Comp 30. The Line Comp 30 utilizes a double-walled aluminum 30mm wide rim. This rim is going to be laced up to Bontrager's Rapid Drive hubs. So this is a place where Bontrager really shines because the Rapid Drive hub is going to have 54 teeth of engagement and easily upgradable to 108 teeth. And to quickly dive into why a high engagement hub like 54 teeth is important, is that means the distance between when you start to pedal, so when you're coasting through, and how far the crank moves to get to the next pedal stroke is going to be much shorter. Now 54 teeth of engagement is pretty typical with some high-end hubs, but 108 teeth, especially when you can do it for about $25 to $30, that's putting you into the class of some super high-end engaging hubs and is just such a sweet addition to this fuel bike. The Trek Fuel EX 9.7 is going to come in and weigh 30.38 pounds. Thanks for joining me for this video on the 2022 Trek Fuel EX. This 9.7 model is super well spec'd, and if you couldn't tell in the video, I'm definitely digging this rig. You know, the look is pretty sweet. For my area, this is one of the better riding bikes that's out there, and I'm interested to see your thoughts and your comments down below. While you're at it, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. It lets me know you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to browse the channel for more like this to check out too.